Good afternoon, everybody. I want to introduce you all to Matt Winn, who's the VP and CIO at Dallas Baptist University in Dallas, Texas. And I'm Dave Kieffer from the Tambellini Group, and I will be hosting a conversation today about Matt and his journey as a relatively new CIO and the work he's doing at Dallas Baptist. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Again, my name is Matt Winn, and I've been at DBU for several years in a number of different capacities. I actually started my full-time career at DBU, left for about 10 years, and then came back. And so I've had kind of lots of different roles within higher ed and K-12, and yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I can go into more in depth into those in a second, but yeah, I've been in my current role for just over a year and a half or so. Mm-hmm. We've made a lot of changes, improvements, made a lot of mistakes, and just trying to kind of figure this out, every day.
That's great. Well, that's kind of the theme of the conversation. I thought it would be interesting for folks to hear the story of not only how you got to the CIO role, because it's not necessarily a traditional path, but also that journey since you've gotten into the seat of how you've taken the organization and moved it forward and how you did that. So let's start off at the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about your professional journey to be a CIO and what the various roles you had along the way that you feel like prepared you for that?
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely not the typical route at all. My first full-time job in higher ed was actually campus security as a campus security officer. And that didn't last too long before I moved into student affairs and worked in housing. So that was the kind of pivotal point for me making a decision that higher ed was something I was interested in, that I wanted to pursue. From there, I actually left higher ed and went to the K-12 space and taught for a number of years. And also, really, that's kind of when I started to kind of get involved in technology more. And really, it kind of started as a technology integrator and as a generalist. My family has an IT background, but that wasn't necessarily a route that I was looking to take. But just because of my familiarity with IT, and kind of being a young teacher at the time, it just kind of came natural to me to use technology in an effective way to teach. And so the school I was at the time, asked me to kind of step into a full-time role helping other teachers with the technology integration. I forgot to mention also I spent some time in enrollment management at another university as well prior to that. But and so I started working with the technology department, also the faculty, kind of acting not only as a trainer and a facilitator and a teacher of teachers, but then also a liaison between the IT staff and the school at large. The IT staff doesn't always have the best reputation of being able to interface directly with teachers and school teachers. And so I understood enough about both areas to kind of serve as that, liaison between the two. And after a little bit of time, both with the kind of planned retirement of the, IT director at that school, and then also just my increasing familiarity with, the infrastructure of the school and the overall technology vision, I was asked to take that over, and I did that for a number of years at that K-12 school. And so that was a huge time period, not only for just professional growth, but also just growth and understanding of IT in general and IT management. At that time, I finished my doctorate, my PhD in learning technologies, which admittedly is more of an educational application of technology and not so much like a computer science route. But throughout that process, I knew kind of that I really wanted to return to higher ed. I love the K-12 space. I just didn't see that there was kind of a long-term future there for me. And about that time, DBU had contacted me and they were interested in me returning in some sort of capacity to come back. That ended up being in online education. So I came back as the director of online education. Again, just having a education background, and then also my PhD in learning technologies, which did have a significant component in online learning. and then just my technology background, it ended up being a really, really good fit. And so I did that for a couple of years, and we got kind of caught up in some of those areas. But I think also, TBU knew that I had an IT management background at the K-12 level, and so I think for them, I was kind of an insurance policy if the current CIO, right, got hit by a bus, to their example words, that they would have somebody that knew DBU, that knew IT, that could come in and fill that gap. And so I did online ed for about 2 years or so, and then that conversation about IT really started to come into play, where the current CIO was filling a dual role as the CIO CFO, and was just getting to the point where he couldn't manage both and didn't want to manage both. So I came over as an associate vice president for a few months, and then pretty quickly just transferred into the full vice president role as the CIO. And so starting from, I think, campus security, right, and then kind of going the K-12 teaching route and even the higher ed teaching route to CIO is not necessarily normal, especially considering I don't have a computer science degree. But I think one of the things that's been helpful is I've had this broad swath of experience across higher ed. So I'm kind of like a generalist when it comes to higher ed, and I'm kind of a generalist when it comes to technology. And so, I'm confident enough in my experiences and knowledge, I think, to be able to, be effective as a leader in my role. But it's also a limitation, because there are certain things, right, where I have to do a lot of research, or I have to rely on the people around me, for some of the more in-depth technical explanations. I feel like I catch on quickly and I understand it quickly. But that is one of the limitations of not kind of taking the traditional track.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest advantages are from that career path? I mean, you've seen really every angle of an institution, from enrollment management through being in the classroom and now in the CIO role. How do you feel like that plays to your advantage?
I think in two ways. Number one, I'm really big on thinking holistically about the large system. And so, I know that some IT leaders get themselves in trouble by making a decision that's the best IT decision, right, that doesn't necessarily play well with the rest of the organization, doesn't support the rest of the organization well. So I think having had firsthand experience in a lot of these different areas, like I understand how that area operates and what their needs are. And so we're able to kind of approach things a little bit easier for those end users and those processes. But then the other part of it too is I'm a full-time faculty member here. So being a faculty member and having a teaching background and education background, I'm able to approach conversations with our faculty as one of them, and so instant credibility. I'm not just the IT guy that doesn't understand them, right? So that's been immensely beneficial, especially because we've undergone so much change that they don't really have the ability to come to me and say, I don't understand what they're going through, right? And so I think that's been easily one of the best advantages to the route that I've taken.
Yeah, you have to take your own medicine as a faculty member, right? whatever you're dishing out, you have to take it too.
Yeah, or when my team comes to me and says, hey, this is what I think we need to do, I can say, yeah, that's not going to work. As a teacher, right? That's not going to work. That's going to be a problem. And so before it even gets to that point, I'm able to kind of weed through that a little bit, which is helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So let's start that journey then. So as you land in the CIO seat, what did you start to assess the IT organization? How does it look to you? What are the things you saw when you got on the inside of the IT organization?
Yeah, I would say I'm kind of a second generation rider of the ship, right? The prior CIO did a ton of work in the 10 years prior to me in terms of riding the ship, but the ship needed to be changed course so much, right, that there's just no way he was going to be able to get it all done. And so I'm kind of picking up where he left off. And so, coming in, I was kind of generally aware of what I was getting into, but not necessarily fully. But I think, one of the things that I found was, there was still so much catch up that needed to happen. And we find ourselves really in an interesting situation because, it's 2020 and technology has evolved so much. And not only has technology evolved, but people's needs and desires, and I think even expectations of what technology can do has evolved so much. And so walking into a situation where I'm playing the dual role of, okay, we just need to get kind of caught up because in this area we're so far behind. But then this other area, we really want to innovate at the same time. You know, it's like a moving target. If I spend all my time trying to just catch us up, by the time I'm done with that, we're going to be behind again. So it's playing this dual role of catch up and innovating at the same time. But I think I also understand the former CIO a lot more now because it was easy first coming into it or prior to coming into it to go, gosh, why are we behind in that area? Or how come we didn't get more done? Or why are we doing it that way? I think I understand why more now because it's just, it takes a lot of resources and time to right the ship. And then you have the competing, priorities of the university that don't always align with what I want to happen or think should happen, right? And so
Yeah.
just trying to balance all that has been a challenge.
Yeah. So did you find some areas where instead of catching up, you could leapfrog and really just abandon some older technology, replace it with a modern technology, as opposed to trying to gradually work your way towards what you thought was current?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, I think like a lot of institutions, there was a lot of homegrown applications, and I know why they did that. At the time, there may not have been something in the industry that solved that problem, or it might have been cost prohibitive, or we may have had the developers in-house that could do it. And so instead of fixing those or getting them on a new server or patching the security issues, we just abandoned them altogether and went to kind of an industry standard product. And so whether it was a syllabus tool or something like that, there were a lot of things that DBU did that was kind of innovative back in the day, but we never maintained it and kept going with it, and so it became a liability at a certain point. So there were lots of little things like that where we just said, forget it. We're not in the business of maintaining our own homegrown applications anymore. We'd really rather use our resources, money resources, to replace the time resource in that aspect. So yeah. Those are some of those areas. And then, there are a lot of processes on campus that were they were void of technology altogether. And,
wow.
Just paper-based problems or lots of spreadsheets and things like that. And so it wasn't that we were behind in upgrading a system, it's that the system wasn't there. And so, there were those things that we had to do where we just had to go out and purchase the system for the first time and implement it. And then all the, cultural changes and training and everything that kind of went with that. So it's been very interesting.
I'll bet. So as you looked at that landscape and you had every sort of problem from a spot where you could innovate to something you had to patch, how did you prioritize that work for the organization?
Yeah, I think first of all, I kind of had to get just kind of a lay of the land and really try to understand where we were and understand, why we made the decisions that we did, what's happening, why is it happening. But then really some things started to emerge, like data integrity, was a big issue that we had. Efficiency was another big issue that we had, and so those were some of those things that we kind of had to start working through. And then also just security in general. And I think that's probably a concern of any organization. But, there were, again, like I said, there were products that we were just missing. For example, we, in this last year, purchased our first CRM. We have never had a CRM. And so all of our recruitment, was maybe done within a few screens of our SIS, but largely kept track of on spreadsheets and things like that. And so even our application for admission was paper-based, or if it was online-based, it was being printed from the back end and then manually typed into the SIS, right? And then, every time you have people's hands, in the process, there's all types of errors and data integrity issues. And so, we had to solve some of those problems, but then also solving those problems also solve some of the efficiency problems too, because such an inefficient system. And not only is it not good for our human capital resources, but it's not a good experience on the student end too if we make mistakes. And so, doing things like, our CRM was huge. We didn't have class scheduling software, right? That was all being done by a spreadsheet, kind of method. And so, as you can imagine, right, we're just spending so much time doing things that aren't very efficient.
Manually, yeah.
And because we're doing it manually, it's garbage in, garbage out. And the more we connect our systems and the more we're reporting on things and trying to make data-driven decisions, right, and those types of things, you put a whole bunch of garbage in, everything that you're getting out is not helpful, right? So it's kind of not.
I mean, those are the situations I feel like where the technology kind of feels like magic to folks who have had to struggle with doing it all manually, scheduling classrooms manually, configuring and getting a system up and running to help them do that has to be a huge burden off of some of those staff members.
I was going to say, some of the conversations I had with people who had been doing that job for 27 years was, I can't conceive of how technology could do what I do, right?
Right.
Of course, I want to be kind, right, and help them at that point, but in the back of my mind, I'm saying, well, not only can it do what you're doing, but it can do it far better than you could do it, right?
Right.
More efficient, it's going to make less mistakes, right, and those types of things. And so, just kind of navigating some of those changes in the personalities that went with it and the culture that went with it, but we've been able to get a lot of it done, which has been great.
Yeah, that's great. So when you think about some of those early changes that you started to make, were there any specific tools or organizations that were critical to you making those moves? I mean, you mentioned the CRM. How did you get the outside help from those, either the technologies or other organizations, to help you make those changes?
Yeah, so we went with Salesforce as our CRM, and then kind of our higher ed layer to that is TargetX. And so this has been really helpful in the implementation of the CRM and getting it ready for us as an institution. But then, we have Elution Colleague as our SIS, and in addition to that, we're on the Unidata structure of that. And so it's not necessarily known for, playing well with integrations very easily. And so the challenge was, okay, we've got this great system. We have this opportunity to really maximize efficiency. So how do we make the connection in a way that makes sense? Pretty quickly, when we started having those conversations, I knew that we were going to have to leverage an integration partner and find an integration partner to help us do that, because we didn't have the expertise in-house. And it was the job was too important to mess up, And so we went out and started looking for integration partners, and we talked to some of the normal names in that space who have the experience necessary, but they were pretty costly, right? Pretty set in their ways about the way that they approach the situation, kind of like, here's our package deal, and this is how we do it, and this is the way we've always done it. But we were fortunate to find kind of a newer player in the market, AMSA, AMSA, and they were really getting into the market of specifically doing integrations for Colleague. And it just so happened that their understanding of Colleague was really rooted in that Unidata structure. And so not only did they understand our environment, but they understood the products that we wanted to integrate, and they were very willing to be flexible and kind of think creatively about what we needed to do, right? So our relationship with AMSA has been, here's what we want to do, or here's our problem, how can you fix that for us, right? Or how can you do that? And they're always excited to do that with us and for us, and it's not kind of like a cookie cutter approach. And as a result of that, we started off on, scheduled integration, where we were running the integration, let's say for admissions, a few times a day, to now it's event-based. And so as soon as somebody is admitted, that, that file goes over to Colleague and creates a record right then. And so it's little things like that we weren't able to really get from any of the other partners, and such a game changer for us.
That's another one that feels like magic to the end user, right? When it goes from, once a day to almost real time.
Yeah,
Huge advantage.
the whole thing of like, well, once somebody's accepted, we can get them into classes 5 days later. And now, we're kind of slowly but surely moving that needle up to say, hey, our eventual goal is for students to be accepted, go through all of the processes they need to go through the various systems, and get them in classes the same day.
Yeah.
And that's the customer service that we want. I think that's the expectations that families and students have in 2020, and it's we do that with the products that we have in place. So AMS has been really great in helping us work through some of those things, and not just on the enrollment front. I mean, HR, everything. We're looking at reimagining a lot of our integration processes. I think the other one that's been really crucial for us, and we're not fully implemented yet, but we're getting close, is CourseDog. Again, another relative new player in the space.
Yeah.
So we are using CourseDog for their full suite. We are doing curriculum management, we're doing class scheduling, and we're doing events management. And all three of those areas were done by hand on paper at DBU before. And so we had been looking for 3 products to solve those 3 areas, and just happened to find one product that did them all. And I think the thing, again, that is really helpful in that space is how they work together. So a professor proposes a new class that goes through the committee, gets approved, it automatically becomes part of the course catalog, and then it is able to be scheduled as a class by the scheduler. And then the event management knows that classroom is being used at that time, right? And so one product, right?
Very smooth. Yeah.
Areas that seem so not connected, right, end up being interconnected in a helpful way. And so those are just really exciting things. I think we've been fortunate to latch on to a couple of companies that were kind of closer to the startup. And so they've been more flexible with us in terms of what we needed and wanted, and I think we're going to reap the benefit of that for sure.
That's great. I mean, if you think about the breadth of those 3 companies and how much they can change an institution, it's pretty phenomenal to focus on those. And having left your ERP in its current state, except for the integration mostly, right, is also pretty economical to not have had to replace that yet. So that's great.
Another part of it too is our kind of whole approach is this like planned obsolescence, business continuity approach. So everything we do, we're trying to keep our SIS, as the main center of truth, right? So bi-directional integrations, so that if we have to move away from any of these, fringe products, it will be easier, right? Not that it's ever easy, but hopefully easier, right?
Right. That's the plan, right? That's great. So into your first year, or near the end of your first year, COVID starts to hit. How has that changed the priority list for your team? Has it just doubled it or changed it?
Well, it's kind of one of those never waste a good crisis, situations. Like COVID has been terrible for the world. I know it's been terrible for people's health. I don't want to trivialize, the impact that COVID has had on people's lives, right? It's been a challenge for us to maintain the safety of our faculty, staff, and students. It's certainly impacted our enrollment, although not as significantly as we initially had thought it might. But as the leader of online education and IT, it's the best thing that's ever happened, because it gave us an opportunity to make use of the extra grace, excuse me, the extra grace that people were going to give us, right? And so, because of COVID, that people knew, right, that there were going to be some bumps and bruises as we relied more heavily on technology. And so we were able to fast track some of our ideas and implementations a little bit, taking advantage of that. And, we had looked at the landscape of IT and just the university as a whole, and we recognized there's so many inefficient processes. There's so many paper-based processes still. And as soon as everybody is forced remote, nobody can use any of those processes anymore.
That's right.
So it was amazing timing, because there were either things that we had ready to implement, but we were kind of wading through the culture, right, and trying to, not force it on everybody really quickly, or there were ideas that we had that we thought, we could solve that problem pretty easily and quickly if we can just navigate the culture. And so, we were able to take advantage of the situation and get a lot done really quickly. And so, yes, it was stressful, but from the IT side, it was wonderful. And then even from the online ed side, we had faculty that, they just didn't need or want to learn new skills. They were full in their current, environment. And all of a sudden they're being thrust into, online teaching only, and they've got to get figured out, and so we were able to really ramp up the professional development. We were fortunate that DBU had been doing online education, since 1998. And so we were kind of a pioneer and leader in that area anyway. So compared to some schools that didn't really have a background in online ed, like, we were doing great on that front. But, it's just, while it was challenging, again, I just can't overstate how amazing of an opportunity it was for us on a whole to get something done.
Well, and not only did you accelerate the culture forward, you were able to bring solutions quickly to folks who were really kind of stuck, right? They were working at home and they couldn't function the way they used to. So
yeah,
it's an interesting pairing, and a terrible time to get some really positive movement to happen. So as folks have come back in the fall, have you seen any desire for regression to old processes?
No, I think initially, right, there was kind of the idea that, like, okay, well, we'll do this until we come back. But, of course, people see, oh, wow, like, this is
better.
It's better, right? And so I think, fortunately, the period of remote work lasted long enough, right, that it's the new normal.
Yeah.
And people aren't going to regress at this point. And so, we've seen a little bit of it, in small fits and spurts, but, for the most part, people have continued to use the new processes and are committed to it because they see the value of it now, which is really helpful.
So how has the fall return gone for your campus so far?
So far, so good. We do have a small number of cases, but very small compared to other universities, both in number and in percentage. Our students are really working hard to make good choices and to do the right thing. We've been able to kind of quickly stand up a few innovative products for, just case management. When all this was happening, we were looking at different companies that were kind of, appropriately so, jumping onto the scene to try to fill that void because, it exists. And what we were finding was, because of just supply and demand, those companies could charge whatever they wanted to charge, and universities were kind of at the mercy of that. Like, we looked at one particular company that they had a flat rate regardless of the size of your institution, private, public, nonprofit, for-profit. It didn't matter. So one of their clients was Goldman Sachs, and they wanted to charge us the same price as Goldman Sachs, right? And it was just like, I don't even need to hear anything else. Like, we're not doing that.
We're at the end of the conversation.
Right. And but we said, you know what? Look, we've got some things in place. We've got some really innovative people. Let's see what we can do. And so through the use of Microsoft Power Automate, through SharePoint, and through Power BI, we were basically able to stand up our own case management system very quickly. That's had great success, not only in managing it, but communicating, what's happening across campus. And, again, while, on the one hand, I say, hey, I don't want to be in the business of like developing our own stuff and maintaining that. I think we look at this and go, this is for a finite time. And if we do this for free and it's effective, then that's a good use of our resources.
That's a great way to extend the tool set that you have very quickly, right? Yeah. That's great. So as you look back on your first year and a half as a CIO, what do you think about in terms of lessons learned that what would you have wanted to tell yourself a year and a half ago that you've now seen and picked up?
Things take longer than you think that they're going to take, and so again, kind of coming into it going, why are we still dealing with this, or why wasn't that done, or how come we still have this? I kind of get it now, because I see how long it takes when you have limited resources and you have competing priorities and you have a global pandemic, right, that comes right in the middle of it. So, I think I would have told myself, like, things take longer than you expect. I think the other part of it too is learning to take a deep breath, and really focus on the things that I can control, and kind of let some of the things that I can't control go by the wayside and not personally affect me. This job can be super high stress and can absolutely eat you alive. And so I think I'm looking at it from the long game of trying to stay well, mentally and physically well, emotionally well. And so, having the wisdom to kind of know the difference between what I should try to control and what I shouldn't control, has been a big learning curve, because I just want to fix it all. I want to solve all the problems. I want to get everything done right. And I think, learning where to push back, how to pick my, battles wisely, and I'm still kind of working on that, because a lot of things I get fired up about, it just may not, in the grand scheme of things, or right now, be the right thing to really push on.
I think that control over what you're going to react to and the wisdom to understand the things you can control are super important in the role, and it makes me think how important it is for your team to see that reflected in your behavior. It really can shape the culture of the IT organization too, to make sure they're reacting in a way that makes sense.
I can't always be the one that controls the narrative of our division, right? So they have to be on the same page, to be able to respond appropriately in all situations. Because I don't want to be the typical like IT house, right, that nobody likes, and everybody's frustrated with, and it's our way or the highway. I really want to serve our university well and protect our university well, and I think as we do more to serve them, that when we need to step in and say no, or really protect the university, that they understand that and they trust us, with that.
Have a good reason to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, I think that it's a fascinating journey you've been on for the last year and a half. Really, the whole kind of arc of your career is really interesting, and I think that there are a lot of institutions who want CIOs with that breadth of background. They're not always easy to find, so it's great for DBU that they have you. And congratulations on a successful first year and a half. Yeah. And let's keep talking as you progress.
We still have a lot of work to do, so
sure. Not near finished, I know.
No, not near finished, and I don't have it all figured out, and I need as much help as I can get to do this thing right and well. So
yeah, that's great. Well, thanks so much for speaking with us today. Again, this is Matt Winn from Dallas Baptist University. I'm Dave Kieffer from the Tambellini Group, and we are a higher ed analyst firm. If you're curious, I'm sure will be a link on this YouTube video for you to find us, and to find Matt if you're interested in making contact with him. And we really appreciate your time today. Thanks, Matt.